Fuel injection. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. This was going to be a carbureted setup, and we were gonna just run it with the carburetor and use our spare hood and cut a hole in it and paint it black and all that stuff. But also, if you remember, about 5 months ago when we bought the hood and got the carburetor set up in the really nice MSD LS ignition controller, we said in the future we would be converting back to fuel injection at some point. Well, it turns out that point, which I guess I didn't explain at the time, had to do with when I could find a reasonably priced solution for the fuel injection. I looked at micro squirts. Actually, a micro squirt would work with the MSD ignition stuff that I have, but it's a relatively crude system. It batch fires the injectors, so that would have worked, but I didn't find one cheap enough. But recently I discovered this. I probably looked at this a year ago or whatever, but forgot about it. This is an MSD Atomic LS system. This is kind of old, actually. They put this out in, I think, 2012 was the first time that they started marketing it. But basically it is everything you need to do an LS injection system in an older vehicle. And it doesn't use a laptop computer or connect to the internet or anything like that. It is really simple. It uses all of the factory sensors and injectors, and I was really impressed with the LS ignition system, the one that I bought for the carburetor setup, because literally you just plug the connectors in and it fires right up. That's the same idea they did with this fuel injection system. So basically what it is these two fuel rails. Now, one of the things they did that's kind of clever, I thought, and I guess if you don't work on electronics you might not appreciate this, but I do. And these fuel rails are basically underneath this cover. Take one of the covers off. It's just a piece of CNC'd aluminum with a hole through it for the fuel rail, well, for the fuel flow, and the injector connections on the bottom of it. Now, if you think about that for a second, well, the other thing they did was all the electronics are mounted on the fuel rail. Like the big heat producers in a system like this are naturally the processor that'll generate some heat, but the injector driver transistors generate a lot of heat. That's why you'll see on a factory computer it has all these cooling fins on it. That's to help keep the processor and the injector drivers cool. So that's the air-cooled method. So essentially what they've done is heat sinked all those components to this billet aluminum piece that has very cool gasoline running through it. So it's effectively a liquid-cooled electronic system for this thing. So I kind of dig that. That's pretty neat to me. That and the fact that it plugs in, it doesn't need a computer. Most of the processing is done here. They have this thing called the power module, which is basically what you use to connect everything to. Here's the main harness, which just plugs in and it connects all your sensors and everything. And the main power to power everything in here. And out of that you have the power that goes to the car. These go to battery. One of these goes to switched power, ground. Super easy. This orange wire that's hanging off of the passenger side here actually goes to AC, I believe. Yeah, that goes to your AC compressor, so it kicks the idle up when your AC compressor comes on. That's a ground. Here's another ground. These two here that are hanging out the sides they just plug right into the factory coils, just like the other ignition controller that I had. I don't have the coils on here right now. This is just for mock-up. And these things communicate with the CAN bus. So there's a CAN bus cable that comes out here and goes to this rail. Then there's a jumper cable that goes between the two rails back here. And that's how the two computers here communicate with each other and communicate with the power module. Not really the power module. The CAN bus is really just a pass-through to the controller. So this is kind of the meat of the system here. This is what talks to the processors in here. And once you get it fired up, it gives you all sorts of menu options to choose what type of engine, what type of camshaft. This is L77, so I can go in there and select L77 and it will already know what injectors, what cam, and what all the other sensors are on the engine. Pretty neat stuff. So what that means is once you select that, you basically can just fire the thing up. So that's pretty cool, kind of like the other MSD controller for the ignition that I got. Now unfortunately for me, I bought an LS7 kit, not really understanding what an LS7 was at the time. And one of the things that's slightly different on an LS7 is the intake manifold. And this, to attach these fuel rails, they rely on these four brackets that they send you that attach to the intake manifold, and then the fuel rail bolts down on top of it. So these don't fit my intake manifold, so what I'm going to do is call MSD and see if they can get me the brackets for a standard LS intake manifold like this one. So, I mean, these things are, the reason they're so cheap right now, like I got this for less than a third of the price of what it was new, which is why I decided to go that way. But they've been discontinued because they have newer products that, well, you know, they think they're better, and but they connect to computers and stuff. This system seems really neat to me. I mean, from a tuner perspective, like if you take your car to the dyno all the time and have a tuner play with it, this little controller probably, you know, a little bit of a pain in the butt for them to deal with, rather than just using HP tuners or whatever on their laptop. But it will get the job done, and I don't need to take this thing to a tuner before I fire the car up. It will start up and run normally, you know, and I can probably tune it myself, which is a big advantage, being that, you know, there's like 3 tuners I can go to, and they're all at least 45-minute drive away from here. So not really an option for a car that's just been completely apart and put back together. You kind of want to be able to drive it around a little bit first to get all of the little problems you're going to run into fixed. Like if you forget to tighten a suspension bolt or something like that, it's going to become pretty obvious just rolling it out in the driveway. But if you have to, you know, tow it to a tuner or something like that, and they run into that problem, you know, you're talking about towing bills, you're talking about having probably somebody else fix something that you screwed up, and you know, there's a whole list of things that can go wrong in that scenario. So that's why I kind of abandoned the stock computer and wiring harness deal. The other thing is, I've seen a lot of, well, not a lot, a few guys on YouTube that are tuners that are actually pretty experienced with the way you tune the factory computers, and most of them have problems with the E38 computer, and that's what this is. So that was another thing that made me want to steer away from this. So should work out really well. I'm pretty freaking happy with this. I'll take you down. I mean, it's super easy. It is like the other system for the to run the coils that I had for the carburetor. You literally plug stuff in. Like, that goes to the cam sensor. There's a little jumper that comes off here that plugs into the fuel rail harness that comes out. Goes to the cam sensor. No problem there. These two go to the throttle body that I don't have on here yet. This is a throttle by wire, and I just got a throttle by cable one that the throttle position sensor and intake air controller will plug right into. So that's not a thing. This one goes to the alternator. That goes to the coils. This one goes to the oil pressure sender. This is the power jumper between the two fuel rails. This is the CAN bus jumper between the two rails. They give you another intake air controller plug just in case, you know, yours is a little different. This is the intake air temperature sensor. They give you a new one of those. Like we said before, that's the AC. This is another ignition coil plug-in, and this guy here is the 58X crank sensor. CAN bus to the power module. I'm not doing such a great job of getting this in the shot, am I? CAN bus comes out of the passenger side head, goes to what they call the power module, and the main harness goes into the power module right there. And this connects to the power module. This is actually the power section, power ground, switched power. And then there's another CAN bus connector that goes to this little MSD controller gadget. This you can actually, you don't have to leave this plugged in. Once you set the car up, you can just unplug it, forget about it. But the other thing you can do is you can leave it in the car. You know, just run this cable through the firewall, and then you can play with it while you're in the car if you need to tune something. So overall, it's a pretty neat system. This is there'll be a fuel crossover pipe that goes between these two rails. On my setup, this will be the fuel pressure in from the pump. This will be the return. This will go to, they don't supply a fuel pressure regulator, so this will go to a fuel pressure regulator that I bought, and then back to the tank. So you'll have a whole return style fuel system. But yeah, fuel injection. Back to it. This should be pretty neat.